Today I'm going to be upgrading my HM Quickshifter from the HM Plus to the newer version, the HM Plus SS. Reason being that this one has a seamless shift and this one doesn't. That's the existing one, which I fitted there with a custom shift rod, not the HM one they sell. Let's see if I can just open this up first, show you what's included. Okay, so it looks like this one comes with some threaded rods. This is the loom, which connects to the ignition coils. Obviously it's specific to the type of bike that you have, in this case the KTM RC8, as you can see. You basically got your ignition coil connection here, and this then goes into the existing ignition coil connection, and that comes out, connects into there. This one goes into ignition coil, similar with the other one. There's only 2 on the KTM RC8, there's 4 on the Honda Fireblade and various other models of bikes as well. And this is the connecting shift strain gauge. The tank has to really come off. You don't have to take it off fully. I actually just had mine resting to the side, stuck it on my spare tyre in fact, and left some of the connections in there. You can completely disconnect it though, it is fairly safe to do, and you just have lots of room to play with. There is an airbox underneath here which you can take off and get easier access to the ignition coils, but in fact you don't have to do that. You can get access to them just by going through the fairing. So you have to take off all this fairing, and in this case I need to take off my crash bungs. The first one is up here. Well, I say the first one, there's 2, whether that's ignition coil 1 or 2, I'm not entirely sure. And then the other one's under here, which you can get access to once the tank's up. Back to shifter rods, we've got here the strain gauge, which is basically the exact same as the HM Plus, just a different colour and a sticker on there. Cable is actually a bit better than the existing one, so that's all well protected. This is the connection here, which goes into the loom, and you've also got the earth connection, which you need to make sure you've got earthed. If you do not have it earthed properly, you'll run into all kinds of problems. And best place, and only place in my opinion, is to connect it to the negative on the battery of your bike. Right, so I'm going to start by removing the strain gauge. As you can see, you've got 2 connections here, and you'll notice that these have the Torx screw connectors and also the nut connector, so you can use either or. So for the first one here, the connection, there's a nut on the back. I need to use a spanner to hold that into place and unscrew that. That'll take that off. This one you can just unscrew on its own, and then that's you got the shift rod disconnected. And then obviously there's a cable here which attaches onto the strain gauge, so I'll take the strain gauge out of the shift rod and then put all of these parts into a nice safe place. Okay, so I've removed the bolts that were holding in the shift rod at the front and the back here. As soon as you do that, obviously the pedal will hang down, so normally that clips in there. That's the nut that holds it in at the back, and that's the screw that goes through the shift rod, through this part of the gear lever and then into the nut. So that's a longer one, so you might put those 2 together. You've got a shorter one here which goes through this end and then connects into here. So make sure you save these in a safe place in the right order, so that when it comes to putting it back together you know exactly what goes where, and right in there is where the strain gauge will go for the new one once I take this one out. So now it's just a case of removing the cable in. So I've just had this cable loose hanging there. Now it seems to be absolutely fine. I've had it there for a while and it's not come loose, not caught in anything, and it just gives it a bit of give because this is moving back and forth. So you can't have it cable tied up to something, otherwise it'll be pulling the wire and then it'll end up damaging it. So cable tied under here, and then it runs up here. I did toy with putting it inside this cable tie wrap, I should say, but I didn't. I just cable tied it to there. That seemed absolutely fine. I mean, it's all waterproof anyway and weatherproof. So then that goes up into there, and then I'll need to take the tank off. I should be able just to pull the wire through, but yes, I'll disconnect these cable ties that I've got here, one up here, and I've probably got one or two which are underneath the seat cowl. Yeah, I think that's one of them in there, and then that's the wire that comes up, connects onto there, and then it just doubles back on itself. This wire then goes down here, which then goes to the ignition coil loom, which is somewhere around there, but once I get the tank off I can show you all of that. So I've uncable tied this here, which connects onto the strain gauge and then feeds up there. So before I start trying to pull anything through, I really need to get the tank off. To do that, there's a couple of things you need to do. The steering dampener needs to come off, so this top screw, don't touch that, that's fine. It's just this one here. This then disconnects it from the bracket which holds the tank in place. This can then just move up and out the way. If you want to, you can just disconnect this as well, have the whole unit out so it's not in the way. So once you've got this off, then you've got the two screws here for the bracket, which you take off. Now that effectively holds the tank into the frame at the front. So you need to take those two out. Then at the back underneath the seat cowl, you've got another two connections here and here, which you both need to release. Just loosen the nut for the steering dampener there. If you notice there's a washer underneath here, grab a hold of that and don't lose that, because that will fall off and you need that to sit in between there. The bolt itself will just sit in there, you don't have to move that. And what I've done is just rested this up out of the way, and then it says we have to disconnect that. Okay, I've just removed the bracket from the front of the tank there. Again, you've got the two bolts there which you want to keep safe. Okay, I just removed the two bolts from the rear of the tank here. Again, you've got these big silver washers which are slotted into the rubber washer. They can come out, so make sure that they are put somewhere safe if they do. These ones are in quite tight, so they'll just stay in there okay. And don't worry about this cable, this is just my camera fitting, which I'll remove as we go along. Once the bolts are off the tank, I've moved on to removing the fairing. So you've got, let me see, there's a bolt up here, there's two under here, you've got three here, two down the bottom here, and then one up here. And as you may remember, I had a crash bung, which is the engine bolt, which I've already taken off. I've removed all of the bolts from the fairing that I mentioned. What I would suggest is a little bit of advice is to store the bolts, obviously somewhere safe, but if you can remember which bolt went into which hole. The reason I say that is because I've taken them off a few times now, and sometimes they just don't go in correctly, or you have issues, or trying to put them back into a different position to where it was before, it just doesn't want to go in, and you end up wearing away threads and all sorts. So if you can remember which bolt went into which hole, and then when it comes to refitting everything, it should be really smooth, and you know for a fact that they went in there initially, so you know it will go in. You just need to be patient with it. So yeah, now that that's off, it's just a case of taking off the fairing, which you just unclip here in the front, and then see that's a bit loose there. This pops out here, and then if you just angle it all, it just slides off. Really simple. These two bits are joined together on the other side, which you don't have to worry about. They just stay connected. and then it's just a case of taking this one off here. Now, to do that, there is actually another bolt, which I've just realised is under here. So you'll have to take this one off as well, otherwise you won't be able to get this off fully. So once that's out, and you've got the top one there, these two, I would start probably by unclipping this section here, because it's got a little sort of clip to say that, and just clips out. And slide this out, pull it back towards the back of the bike, just to angle it ever so slightly. If you've got two hands, obviously this will be a lot easier instead of doing it with one, like I'm doing because I'm a dick. Ooh, probably end up scratching the fairing. Right, and then that's that section off. So stick that down there. For the air filter to come off, very easy. There's just two screws for it. There's one down here, which is in there. So you unscrew this one. There's one in behind the radiator coolant. I don't know if you can see just in there. To get into that, you need to unscrew this cap. Just unscrew it with your hands and then leave it to the side. Maybe get a cloth, because there will be some fluid that will drip out and go everywhere. So I've just removed the radiator fluid tank cover there, which I've just laid down to the side. Had a cloth ready, so anything that's spilt out, you can see there, it's pretty right up to the top. Then you just pull this cable forward, cable, hose, tube, whatever you want to call it, and you've got clear access now into this sneaky little bastard. Right, so I've removed the two screws from the air intake on this side. Once those are off, you hold onto the back here, pull this out, because that slots in there. That should now just come fully out. Just need to give it a little bit of a wiggle. Make sure you don't get any of these hoses caught up as well. There we go. And then at the front it will just slide out. There we go. So that's that removed. Now we have a lot better access to, oops, let's try and fix this rubber seal, just to make sure it's in place for when you put it back on. For some reason the existing loom that I had 4 connections on it when I actually only need 2, which suggests to be that's for a different fucking bike. I was sold the wrong one, but it works, so they must be universal connections. I hope. Let me just move this out of the way. Oh, dear Lord. Right. There we go. So that's the ignition coil there, connector. So now you can get your hand into there. Hopefully. Like I said, if you have small girly fingers like me, you just stick your hand in there. You can get onto the clip to loosen it and then pull it out. Saves you having to do the air tank cover and remove all of that. Okay, what I've done is just lifted the tank slightly and rested it up a little bit. The reason being that you have to, actually you can see in there, that's the other ignition coil. So that's what you need to get into. You need to remove that connector in there. So you've got connections underneath the tank. I don't know if you can see those, but you've got the fuel intake valve. Now that can actually just slot off. There is the connection is right there, so you can just basically disconnect that, and that will be fine. It won't leak or anything like that. Well, it might leak a little bit, so like I said, get some cloths and whatever. Also underneath here, there's a white connector. This one here. This needs to be disconnected also, because that goes up into the bottom of the tank. So there's a bit of give, so you could still pull the tank up a fair bit, but if you can get your hand in, like this, there's a little tab. pull that down. Oh dear God, one-handed, not a good idea. Okay, so that's the connector there, which goes up to the tank, disconnected. I just need to get that white one, which I'm having a bit of problems with. So what I'm going to do, because there is slack on this, I can actually lift the tank up, and it should give me better access to it. Right, here we go. I'm just going to hold it here just for the moment, just to show you that that's where the ignition coil is. That's the fuel intake there, so you can take that out, and this is the white connector that I'm going to try and disconnect now. He says optimistically. I could do with a head mount on this camera. Yeah. This is probably the worst one as well. It's an absolute nightmare. Come on, you fucker. It is budging, but it's just... oof. Just in there so tight. Right, okay, so that's that disconnected. That just falls down there. You'll find that again later. Now I've got the loom cable tied in there as well. And like I said, the fuel cap, which... all this tubing here you can leave connected. Like I said, if you've got somewhere that you can position the tank somewhere safe. I've just got a cloth. I'm just going to go in underneath here, if you can see that, and then disconnect this, but I'll need both hands. So, alright, that took longer than expected. That's the fuel intake disconnected, as you can see, hopefully. If I twist that round, there's a metal cap on the top. Basically you push that down and then pull it apart, and it's as simple as that. And I've just got a cloth in there just in case there's any extra fuel, just to cover that up and wipe it as well. But no fuel came out of that at all, so that's secure enough that you can do that. So I can get rid of this cloth now, and then just by leaving this connection here, I should now be able to manoeuvre the tank into a safe, out of the way position. Right, so as you can see, I've got the tank just sitting to the side so that I don't have to disconnect these hoses. White plug disconnected and black plug, whatever they're called. And then you've got clear access to that ignition coil. So I'm just going to disconnect the loom, which is basically just a case of pushing down this clip here and pulling it back. And that's it out. Simple. Now the original connection from the bike is this one. So as you can see, again, you just hold that down. Just hold it down and then loosen it off. So that's the original one that was in there. So I'm going to leave that there, but the actual loom itself I'm going to completely remove. That cable tied here. So I need to snip that and then I can get this out. So. Yep, and that bit of plastic's just fucking vanished into the bottom of the bike, so I need to get a hold of that. Balls. Oh, there it is, sitting on the chain. Yeah, you don't want those flying around your bike, that's for sure. So, this can now come out here. There we go. And that's one part of the loom disconnected, the other part goes up to the front coil. Strain gauge, as I said, is down there, so we just need to pull that up and out of the way. And as you can see, I've got the cables running up there. Let's go around, shall we? Head torch would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Yes, so I've got that in there, put a bit of Velcro in there just to hold that in place. That was the earth wire from the original one, which was tiny and wouldn't fit reach to here, so that's why I've had to put this extra cable in. So I need to disconnect that, snip all these. Okay, snip that. Okay, that's the original ignition coil connection there. So let's see if I can disconnect this. Okay, that's off. So that's the original one there, this is the loom. So that's that end done. I also need to take the one off the ignition coil, which if you use one hand under the bottom of the frame, one at the top, hold down the clip, and then you should just be able to slide it out. There we go, that's out. So I'm just going to push that up, and that's the existing loom disconnected. That's how you remove a quick shifter. Strain gauge, the configuration units, and the loom, which is connected up here, which I've obviously still got cable tied at the moment, and my extension for the earth wire to make sure that that connected to the negative of the battery. And now that's removed, it's time to fit the new one.